Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Inaya Falarin Imam. We've got a fantastic show for you to drag you into the weekend. In fact, in the last few seconds, we've had it confirmed even, please be said, that Insulate Britain, I am concerned about it actually, Insulate Britain are coming on after they did a protest yesterday that actually blocked a HGV full of insulation from getting to a house. So we'll chat to them about that.
Well, speaking of protests, protesters, including Greta Thunberg, are taking to the streets of Glasgow to demand action on climate change from leaders and politicians as the COP26 conference continues.
Yes, and entertainer Lionel Blair has been hailed a showbiz trooper following his death at the age of 92. The TV star, known for his glittering career spanning 70 years, died in the early hours of Thursday morning.
Yes, plus a primary school in Scotland has asked if girls and boys wear skirts to promote gender equality. How do you feel about this? We'll be discussing the rights and wrongs of this in a moment.
We will indeed. We'll have all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. And you can get in touch, as indeed hundreds of you already have, GBviews at gbnews.uk. So keep those coming, people.
Well, a primary school teacher is encouraging boys and girls to wear a skirt to school to promote gender equality. Teachers and pupils at Casterview Primary in Edinburgh took part in an initiative for the first time on November 4th, coined Wear a Skirt to School Day.
Imaginative.
Well, the move was inspired by a campaign in Spain where teachers and pupils have worn skirts in class to support student Mikel Gomez, who was expelled for wearing one last year.
Yes, well, Castleview pupils, equivalent to year 6. So I think, what does that make you, about 10, 11, I think, you're in year 6, asked teachers if they could do something similar to show their support after learning about gender stereotypes. Parents praised the school for promoting child-driven learning and encouraging their individual passions and ideas. Well, joining us now is Michael Pike, spokesperson for the Campaign for State Education. I just want to find out where you're at on this particular issue then. What's your view in the round?
OK, well, the Campaign for State Education doesn't really have a view on boys wearing skirts, so I am rather speaking in a personal capacity here. This particular initiative came from the children themselves. It wasn't dreamed up by the teachers. It wasn't imposed on the children. So I don't think there's a great deal to see here in this particular instance. I gather that the children did some research and found out about the events in Spain that you alluded to in your introduction. And it seems to have been
the thing
one
is,
where the children who didn't want to take part were allowed not to take part. So I can't see there's a huge amount to see.
Well, I think it stems, doesn't it, from them? I think that was the key line for me anyway in that intro there, was about the fact that it stems from them learning about gender stereotypes and things like that. Should we be teaching children... I mean, these children will have learned about gender stereotypes presumably for a couple of years now. Should we be teaching 8-year-olds about gender stereotypes, really?
Well, yes, I certainly think we should. It's too late by the time you get to... by the time the children are past puberty. Yes, children should be taught about gender stereotypes. I think they can be extremely harmful. Children who don't fit in can become extremely unhappy and often bullied. So, yes, I think the more we teach children about this and the more we work to reduce gender stereotypes, the better.
What does wearing a skirt really do? I mean, for example, do we need to paint our skin black in order to learn about racism? I mean, can't just kids be educated on treating people equally? Why does boys having to wear feminine clothes teach them about gender stereotypes?
Reinforce, isn't it?
I'm a bit surprised that you refer to skirts as feminine clothes. In Scotland, the Scottish national dress involves men wearing skirts.
Well, presumably they're wearing skirts because it's about gender stereotypes. So I mean, it's not a surprise that if you go to the kind of the female section, you're going to see lots of skirts, and it's unlikely you're going to see that in the men's section. I mean, let's not pretend that we don't know it's a woman's clothing.
It's a fair point. I don't think in itself any one single event teaches children enough about gender stereotypes to make a big difference. It's a cumulative business. One of the things you have to bear in mind is that throughout history, feminine clothing, as you put it, has always been regarded as inferior. to male clothing. For example, it's donkey's years since women in our society were allowed to wear trousers, which at one time they weren't, although they wore them as standard in other societies.
Okay.
But
The fashion industry is booming, I think.
I remember you might remember in the 1960s, there were, no, you won't. Sorry. If you look at your history, I apologise. If you look at your history, you may see that in the 1960s, there were shops selling allegedly unisex clothing. But in fact, it was all male clothing. And it was all right for girls to wear boys' clothing, modified, etc. It was never all right for boys to wear female clothing. And I think probably what these children are trying to suggest is that that's not equal. And I think it's only about thinking about it.
All right, OK, Michael, stay with us, but we're going to just throw over to Teresa Bliss. Just before I do that, Beverly's been in touch on the emails, loads of emails flying in about this issue of potentially a school deciding that the boys should wear skirts for a day, or the pupils really, I suppose, deciding they wanted to, apparently, wear skirts for a day to essentially smash gender stereotypes. Beverly's been in touch. Is Patrick wearing a skirt today? No, Beverly, as always, I am totally naked from the waist down on the news. But anyway, we're going to go to Teresa Bliss, who is an educational psychologist. Now, Teresa, thank you very much. What do you make of this story, then?
I thought it was an interesting story, particularly is that the whole idea about wearing skirts was driven by the young people themselves. We do teach gender stereotyping from a very young age without realising that. I used to sit in playgroup with my children when they were young, and it often drove me mad when the playgroup leaders were saying, I heard them saying, oh, little girls don't do this, little boys don't do that. So that is gender stereotyping from a very young age that we do unconsciously.
But isn't it
often as parents we do that?
But isn't it true that, you know, it is not clear 100% what is physiological or biological and what is social and cultural? I mean, you might go to any country across the world and it might be expressed in different ways, but boys and girls do have different cultural expectations. And I think, you know, I remember when I was a little guy, I was very stereotypically girly, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, do you not worry that we are, as adults, imposing our own prejudices and anxieties about gender onto children, when actually some kids just naturally are quite gendered, and some girls are feminine and like to do girl things, and some boys are masculine and like to do typically boy things? What's the problem with that?
Yes, of course. As adults, we impose our ideas, again, subconsciously, without thinking about it on our children. And we impose our religion and our social views, as well as our gender views on our children when we're rearing them, because that's just our own blueprint in our heads about how people should behave.
So do you want a totally androgynous society, then?
No, not at all. In fact, I have 3 children and 2 of them have same-sex partners. So, you know, I just think we should be allowed to express ourselves in however we turn out.
But don't kids also need guidance? You know, when you have a 4 or 5 or primary school year old child, they don't know much about society. And I wouldn't, you know, trust a little kid to be able to, you know everything about how they should behave in the world. Isn't it the responsibility of adults to understand what's right and to guide the kids in behavioural norms so that they can fit in and be in a socially cohesive society?
In behavioural norms to a certain extent, but if you are a child growing up doubting your own sexuality, then you can feel very isolated if you are being told that you should behave one way and in fact you feel you want to behave in another way. One of my daughters, I can remember begging her when she was about 4. I made what I thought was a beautiful dress for her. Please wear a dress for mummy, because she only ever wanted to dress in trousers. She was much more comfortable dressed that way. In fact, what she would prefer to do was dress a Super Ted. when she was 4.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I do wonder now, because it looks to me anyway as though, I mean, we're talking about this issue, and I get the impression that the vast majority of primary schools now, and indeed the education system as a whole, is pretty free and easy when it comes to this kind of thing. Have we not achieved this goal now? And in which case, if a parent does choose to, I don't know, I suppose I was nearly say the word impose, but just enforce gender stereotypes, or allow gender stereotypes, or promote gender stereotypes onto their child, shouldn't they be allowed to do it? Because that child will be allowed and will be given the freedom in schools now to actually behave however they want. I don't think it's as potentially mentally tough, is it, as it used to be to be growing up now and be experiencing the idea that you maybe are attracted to someone of your own sex, or you may be born into the wrong body. I don't know if we're still there, are we? I think we've moved on.
We haven't moved on everywhere, let me tell you. Just earlier this year, I was seeing a young person who was transitioning because of acceptance. But first of all, these people have to accept themselves. I can remember one partner from one of my children saying that he hated himself when he was very young because he'd suddenly lost all the things he expected to have, like the possibility of a wife and a family and be like his brothers and sisters. So that took a lot of personal adjustment for him. And I think that's true of most people who don't fit the gender stereotypical expectations.
Well, look, thank you very much. It's a fascinating discussion. I'm very, very pleased to have had you involved in it. Teresa Bliss there. Fantastic surname, that, isn't it? Bliss, anyway. He's an educational psychologist.
Yes. Well, after the break, entertainment. Entertainer Lionel Blair has been held as a showbiz trooper following his death at the age of 92. The TV star, known for his glittering career spanning 70 years, died in the early hours of Thursday morning. We'll pay our respects after the break.
Hello, good morning. Another frosty but bright start for southern parts of the UK. Cloudier and milder elsewhere, but actually through today it's dry for most ahead of some unsettled weather arriving at the weekend. That unsettled weather coming with these weather fronts. But for the time being, those fronts are simply staying enough away to give us a largely dry start, and also a bright start there across East Anglia in the southeast. A touch of frost first thing, a chilly start. Stays bright until lunchtime, but these areas of cloud are sinking southeastwards. And for most, it's a cloudier day compared to yesterday. Still some breaks in the east and the south, still some sunshine coming through. And for most, it's a dry day, but some spots of rain there for North Wales, North West England and Western Scotland. A milder day as well. We've lost that wind chill. The temperature's a couple of degrees up on yesterday, 11 to 13 Celsius. And into bonfire night, well, it's looking reasonable for most, with large parts of the UK staying dry with clear spells. But there will be thicker cloud towards the northwest and some light outbreaks of rain until after midnight, when the rain turns more persistent for northern and western Scotland and the wind picks up as well. Further south, with a bit more of a breeze, a bit more cloud. Certainly a frost-free start to the weekend, 8s and 9s as we start the day on the thermometers. But a lot of cloud and that keen breeze sticking around for Saturday in the south. Further north, wet and windy. Heavy rain for the West Highlands for the first part of Saturday. That wet weather sinking through Northern Ireland, Northern England, and then arriving into Wales by the middle of the afternoon. But the front is weakening, so not a huge amount of rain expected in these places. The wind, though, does pick up behind the weather front. A very windy night indeed to come for northern parts of the UK, particularly northern Scotland, where, combined with some large waves, well, that could cause some coastal impacts. But it is a milder weekend for all of us.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage. I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Now, showbiz veteran Lionel Blair sadly has passed away at the age of 92. The performer, whose career spanned over 7 decades, was best known as a team captain on the show Give Us a Clue. In recent years, the star made appearances on Celebrity Big Brother and The Real Marigold Hotel.
Yes, comedian Giles Brandis paid tribute to his friend, saying he leaves a legacy of smiles and laughter.
Oh, well, joining us now is showbiz broadcaster and author, the wonderful Amy Nicol. Amy, thank you very much for joining us. Look, it's a sad day, isn't it? He touched so many lives.
It is a sad day. It's also such a pleasure to remember someone like Lionel Blair. And also I find it funny because this is probably the only time in his career when everyone is saying his age, because he used to always say, I'm 59 plus the VAT, which I quite love. He's just one of the most charming, gorgeous men in showbiz. And as you said at the beginning, an absolute showbiz veteran.
Long his career has been, isn't that just remarkably impressive, really, in this day and age?
And I actually did, I watched an interview that he did in 2016, and he said himself what his career highlight was out of that big career, and it was actually performing in 1961 at the Royal Variety Performance with Sammy Davis Jr. when he did tap dancing, because I think we sometimes forget just what an amazing dancer he was, and personal life, and he was also such a dear friend to so many people, and I think that's why we're seeing such lovely, gorgeous tributes today, because he just, like, even thinking of him just makes me smile, because he just had that infectious energy. Like, I used to see him on red carpets and speak to him, and you just be like, oh, he's just a lovely presence. And I don't think they make stars like this anymore, really.
No, I was about to say that.
Generation.
Yeah, I was about to say exactly that, actually, Amy, which is, this old-style star, really, someone with actual talent, right? So across numerous different fields, they can act, they can dance, they can entertain, they can crack jokes, they've got great comic timing, a whole thing. You don't really see many of them anymore, do you?
And also, he's happy to be in showbiz. He's not moaning about it all the time. He just loved what he did, and he wanted to do it as much as possible, and he made everyone really happy by doing that.
He did indeed, and he'll be sadly missed. And it's the energy, I think, isn't it, as well? The energy that he brought up, and it must have been impossible to have been in his company, I suppose, and not be falling around laughing and having a good evening. I imagine when Lionel turned up, it was just good times, wasn't it?
I mean, just think about it. He's probably one of the only people that could go on the ITN News and do a tap dance. Like, anywhere he went, he made it fun, and that's something that I hope that I can take from him and try and do myself as well, because he just had this amazing infectious energy. He didn't care where he was going to make it fun, and I love that about him.
Yes, indeed. He actually, the Queen famously just recently turned down the Oldie of the Year award, right? And I've just seen here that in 2019, Lionel accepted it, So he was the oldie of the year in 2019, which is fantastic, really. There you go. So, yes, well, look, thank you very, very much, Amy. It's been great to have you on the show, and make sure you come back soon. Amy Nichol there. I think just paying tribute, you know, in the way that I imagine Lionel Blair would have wanted. It's not all doom and gloom, you know, a bit light-hearted as well, of course.
Well, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that struck me, and I think she echoed it as well, that he kind of didn't take himself too seriously. You know, he wanted to make everything fun, and he had this infectious energy, and I just think that is so lovely.
Yeah.
Particularly when we do live in this kind of era of doom and gloom. We were kind of talking about this 100,000 people protest about, you know, the climate change. I do think that just thing after thing seems to be very negative, and actually people that actually remind us that, you know, enjoy ourselves, let's dance, let's, you know, do a range of things that bring joy to our lives, I think is such a nice thing.
Yes, which makes me want to learn to tap dance, actually, which is a terrifying thought for everyone concerned, especially the downstairs neighbours, I imagine. But there we go. Right, moving away from that now. Roger Hutton has announced his resignation as chairman of Yorkshire Cricket Club in the wake of the Azim Rafiq racism allegations. And, look, if you're just joining us now, this is essentially the story that broke, which is that that particular individual cricketer was called a P-word, as it were, by another member of his team, and then obviously there was an investigation into it, and essentially, I don't want to use the word cover-up, but nothing was basically done about it, and since then, it's obviously kicked off. Well, we've been joined now by former England cricketer Monty Panesar. Monty, thank you very much for joining us. Look, obviously, do you think this resignation is the right decision?
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me on the show. I think it is the right decision because the politicians have been, blaming, Roger Hutton, the chairman of, Yorkshire County Cricket Club, that he is held accountable and responsible for the cultural change that was required, and he failed to do that. And he's obviously apologised that he was unable to persuade the rest of the sort of board members because they are unwilling to make them sort of changes. And I think, unfortunately, he had to resign because, his position was, under extreme pressure, and a lot of people wanted to, see new changes happening at the club.
Monty, question here. Now, I'm not a big sports person, and I'm not going to say that I know all of the ins and outs of this particular issue, but just in terms of some of the context, I've just got a genuine question. Do you think, because this came on other shows and other interviews that I've seen discussing this issue, that racial slurs, or what is understood as racial slurs, is wrong in every single context, and that, for example, even amongst friends or amongst particular groups that might understand that they have a particular way of speaking and a particular way of joking. Do you really think that in any context, even amongst your own peers, with your own understanding of what is okay and what the boundaries are, it should be completely wrong? Because I think about the consequences of this idea of imposing outside perspectives on interpersonal dynamics where all of the different issues are not always particularly clear in terms of what's involved. What is your response to that?
Yeah, look, I think that's a great question, because I think sometimes people fail to understand, what is racial discrimination or, any other form of discrimination. And the only way you're going to understand this is when it hits your own pocket, financially. And that's how I think Yorkshire County Cricket Club will probably have to sit down, and they've got an emergency meeting apparently today. More resignations are going to take place. And when sponsors are pulling out, these multinational companies are actually, this could be a change, for society. People will be thinking, right, if we don't, embrace diversity or inclusivity, then, finance will be pulled out. And that's how you're going to probably learn more about, how to, make everyone feel welcome in an organisation.
Well, but Monty, I mean, I also have worries about a very narrow understanding of what diversity and inclusion is. Does it mean that everybody has to think the same, that nobody can have slights or misunderstandings? And actually, unless you conform to a very particular understanding of diversity and inclusion, then you risk financial suicide.
Well, I think these companies are teaching us that. They have their own values. They have their own perceptions of what their definition of diversity is and inclusivity. And by them sort of pulling out, you look at Nike's pulled out, you've got Yorkshire Tea pulling out. And as a consumer, I know this is a sensitive topic, racial, topics that we're talking about. But also as a consumer, if I'm walking down the street, I'll be thinking, I may pop down to Nike because they believe in diversity. I may go and buy a Yorkshire tea because they do that. And that's also from a brand perspective, they've got to, that's what they believe in, and that's what we want to see.
OK, all right. I when I was younger, I used to play a bit of regional cricket, a little bit of county cricket and stuff like that. And I can always remember growing up that when I played against Yorkshire, or North Yorkshire especially, for a county that's got a huge Asian population, it was very rare that I would play against an Asian player who'd been picked at the youth level. And I found that absolutely incredible. In fact, too hard to believe, right? The idea... And there was an implication there, to be honest with you, that maybe that hinted at something. Just very lastly, Monty, just quickly, have you ever yourself been experienced anything like this? The dressing room environment, the banter's going, as it were, the cracks going like this, and someone goes too far?
Well, look, I haven't been... no one's ever said the P word to me. And, amongst dressing room banter, we always sort of say fun things to each other, depending on, some people may not be good at, certain aspects of their game. And you have that kind of banter. That's the camaraderie. That's the, the team spirit that, helps everyone to sort of connect. But then, if there's certain sort of, racial terms that, are inappropriate, people should have an understanding and not try and say that. So it's really important, that is obviously addressed. And in terms of your Yorkshire, when you played cricket, you didn't see any sort of Asian players. It's because Yorkshire didn't embrace anyone, who wasn't born in Yorkshire to play for the county until 1992. And then you had the likes of Lancashire. You have Wazzy Makram, Clive Lloyd, who played during that time. And that's where you look visually, you're going to think, well, I'm probably more accepted in Lancashire than I am at Yorkshire.
I think that's absolutely spot on. Monty, thank you very much, not only for joining us, but for providing me with, and indeed the nation, with some wonderful cricketing memories over the years as well. Monty Panesar there, England cricketing legend. Well, after the break. Sorry, I had to double-take them because I wasn't sure if I was reading this correctly, but I am. The return of Keith Vaz, ladies and gentlemen. Locals in the parliamentary seat of Claudia Webb fear that the disgraced MP could make a return. Gosh, we'll find out all of that after this morning's headlines.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. Here are the latest headlines. The Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi, has admitted the government made a mistake when it combined a vote on disciplinary procedures with the Tory MP's suspension. Former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson has now officially resigned after starting a new job within the Treasury. He faced a 30-day ban for breaching lobbying rules, but a Conservative vote blocked the recommendation before making a U-turn. Yorkshire County Cricket Club chairman Roger Hutton has resigned with immediate effect. He's calling on the executive board to follow suit. It's after the club was suspended from hosting international and major matches in the wake of Azim Rafiq's racism allegations. Hutton says frustration with board members and senior management led to his decision. And some news just in. England rugby captain Owen Farrell has tested positive for COVID. It's a major setback for the squad on the eve of their Autumn Nations Series clash with Tonga at Twickenham. No other players have tested positive. We'll bring you more at the top of the hour. British Airways parent company IAG has warned it's likely to make a £2.5 billion loss this year. BA says passenger numbers are starting to improve but remain well below pre-pandemic levels. The airline says the reopening of transatlantic travel will help the company return to profit. I'll have more on today's main stories for you at the top of the hour. See you then.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
So plenty going on. Tom Harwood, our political correspondent, is at COP26 and is here now to tell us more about what's been going on over the weekend.
That's right. Here at COP26, there have been a slurry of announcements over the last week. Today is the youth-focused day. I spoke to the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zwahi, around an hour ago, who was telling us exactly what's going to change in terms of UK schools, putting the environment at the heart of the curriculum. I had some concerns there that this might encourage activism amongst teachers, but he said that there were safeguards in regard to groups like Extinction Rebellion not being allowed to be promoted in schools. Of course, earlier in the week we've heard about Coal Day yesterday, where almost 100 countries signed up to a new initiative to phase out coal. The UK's already got there pretty much, so it's about other countries catching up with us. Before that was Finance Day, where finance ministers of the world united to try and bring about trillions of pounds in terms of private investment into green causes. And of course there was the World Leaders Summit for the first 2 days. That was when all of the prime ministers, presidents, whatever other big general secretaries, I don't know, probably some more grandiose titles in smaller countries. They all gathered here in COP26 in Glasgow to try and sort some stuff out, and there was that big announcement over trees. So that's what's happened this week, although something slightly interesting is going on this afternoon, not within COP26 itself, but without. Greta Thunberg hopes to lead a 100,000 strong march through Glasgow, protesting the Environment Conference. No, I don't really quite understand it either. The fact is that Greta Thunberg is not happy with all of the different announcements, all of the billions, even trillions that have been pledged to climate causes. She's not happy with the 90% of the global economy signing up to net zero. She's not happy with the phasing out of coal. She's not happy with just about every single thing that this conference has so far agreed. It's remarkable, but yes, she's protesting the climate conference.
With 100,000 other people, Tom, as well, supposedly, which I find it interesting that she asked the striking workers to come and join her, but those striking workers, as far as I can tell, are bin men. And I very much doubt that they're going to want to attend a Glaswegian binman is going to want to attend a march that's going to cause a load more mess that presumably he'll have to clean up when they go back to work. Do you think she will get 100,000 people there?
When it comes to all of these kinds of protests, there are lots of exaggerated numbers that we all hear. And actually, it's not normally until about a week after the protest that we actually have some sort of semblance of accuracy with regard to the figures. It's very hard to estimate. Will she get 100,000 people? I mean, 30,000 people came from around the world to come to COP. Certainly not all of them will be marching there. Many of them she's marching against. Will she be able to get 100,000 people through Glasgow? Well, Scotland is a country of around 5 million people, half the population of London. So is that number realistic? Maybe not, but ultimately no one wants to second guess it. This is the number that she hopes she'll attract, and certainly she has a concerningly large following amongst young people, so potentially she'll get good numbers. Will it be 100,000? I'm a little bit sceptical.
Well, there we go. Tom, thank you very much, as ever, and I hope you enjoyed Glasgow this weekend as well. I'm sure you will. Tom Harwood there, our political correspondent at COP26.
Yes, well, now, you may have seen the images yesterday of the latest Insulate Britain protest in Westminster, literally preventing an insulation lorry from delivering a load of, yes, you guessed it, insulation.
Yes, well, this isn't the first time the group have been criticised for preventing the very thing they say isn't happening enough in this country, insulating Britain's homes. But more seriously, with yesterday's protest so close to Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital, are Insulate Britain now endangering the lives of others as well as inconveniencing tradespeople?
Yes, well, we're joined now by Dr Bing Jones, one of the spokespeople for Insulate Britain. Doctor, do you not see the irony in some of the images that have been coming out, that there was an insulation truck doing exactly what you're calling for, and you guys are blocking it? And I'm sure there's going to be many other instances in the past and also in the future of you guys blocking the very thing that you're wanting to achieve.
Well, of course, there'll be people of all sorts of works of life, trades in any blockage which we make, but you've got to get the picture here. We're doing this we're making people miss a meal to save everybody from starving to death. And in terms of that insulation truck, what we're doing actually is getting those people an enormous amount more trade. What we want to do is to get insulating people working for the rest of their lives. That's exactly what we're doing, helping that person in that truck insulate houses.
Dr Jones, isn't it very convenient that essentially you justify everything that you do by preventing all of these catastrophes? Isn't that a very easy way to avoid any criticism? If I say that I'm going to do something that horrendous, that disrupts the lives of millions of people, but justify it on the ground of this grand, noble cause, then that basically gives me a get-out-of-jail-free card. And is that exactly what you want? A get-out-of-jail-free card where no one can really criticise you or challenge you because you are professing to be acting on behalf of all of us for a grand, noble cause?
No. What we want is to get into jail card. What we're doing is these are good, ordinary, kind people who are worried about your children. And we want to go to jail because we want to expose the fact that the government is not looking after us. They are not looking after your children. They're pretending to look after
But why do you need to be enveloped in Boris Johnson's bosom 24/7? Why can't you just look after yourself?
I'm sorry, I don't understand that.
Why do we need the government to look after every single element of our lives? Oh, if Boris Johnson didn't tell me to put pants on today, I wouldn't have. If Boris Johnson doesn't look after me in this regard, just insulate your own home.
I'm quite sure that you haven't even begun to read what all these reports are saying. The government's Climate Change Committee is talking about a massive insulation programme which is absolutely core to our addressing this climate problem. We haven't even begun. Individual people can't solve the problems of the climate crisis. We can do a little bit, we can turn the tap off when we're cleaning our teeth. It's absolute nonsense. That is not what's needed. What's needed is 90% reduction in our emissions. You guys haven't read the reports. You haven't troubled yourself to look at what the Chatham House report said on the 14th of September, which is that thousands of people, millions of people are going to be fried to death.
I think that you really need to be cautious of some of the catastrophic claims that you're making. But actually what I can say is that I am living in a society that is a million times more economically resilient and sustainable than generations before. And that's because of economic development. That's because of the Industrial Revolution. That's because many of my ancestors, and I'm sure yours, fought and died to live in the materially secure society that we live in now. And actually, I think humanity has faced many challenges in the past, and the best way that you deal with them is economic development, economic resilience, and you want to take us back to a time long before we had the kinds of resilience that we have now to deal with environmental and social challenges. Isn't that right?
Inaya, you're talking nonsense. It's complete rubbish.
Same for you.
What we're doing, we're sitting in a society which has caused the biggest problem that humanity has ever faced. Business as usual is mostly fueled by fossil fuels, and they are burning our planet. And we've got to change it. And it's senseless to talk about security. We are actually heading for insecurity. It's inevitable that there will be billions of people who will be unable to feed themselves, and they'll be unable to make the food which we need to eat. 50% of our food comes from abroad, and those people will not be sending us their food. Our supermarket aisles will be empty, and our pets will die first.
Well, look,
we have no picture of how bad this is going to get.
You've had a chance to make these very catastrophic claims.
I don't know how you get out of bed in the morning.
And I really, that was the point I was just about to say. I mean, I don't see how we can have any practical, reasonable solution that addresses problems when you create a culture and a climate of fear, which terrifies young people, paralysing them, giving them, anxiety and depression at a time in their life when they should be free and enjoying themselves. And I think that you are able to encourage people to go to jail because you're in a very privileged position. Most people neither can't afford or aren't able to actually go to jail when they've actually got to feed their kids in the present time. So I think you're speaking from a very privileged position.
It doesn't matter what position I'm speaking from. What matters is the fact that your job is to be popular, and my job is to tell the truth. And the truth is frightening. I'm a doctor. I'm a retired doctor, and if somebody's got
that disagree with you.
It's silly for them to be hopeful before they've gone and got their treatment. They should go and get their treatment first, and then try to be hopeful. If they're not frightened, they won't go get the treatment.
It's a bit rich, isn't it, to talk about people getting treatment when your lot have been blocking ambulances, you've been blocking people from trying to get to hospital. A woman nearly passed away because she was having a stroke in the back of a car, and you guys were gluing yourself to the M25. I could go on. People haven't been able to go and see their relatives in their dying moments because of what people like you are able to do, which is glue yourself to a road. So don't talk about treatment here. If you really cared about it and you really wanted to make a massive issue and you really wanted to go at this government and make them do something, why didn't you have the bottle to glue yourself in front of the beast up at COP26? Stop President Biden in his tracks, make an international scene. But you don't do it, do you? You just sit in a cycle lane somewhere near Parliament.
There have been no serious problems documented that we know about. We always have a policy of letting blue lights through, and the incidents that you're talking about has been completely... Nobody's managed to substantiate.
You want to go at me for not reading the Chatham House report. You need to go and read other reports that prove that people have been made seriously ill and nearly died as a result. So you can't, on one hand, come here and say, well, I've read the report and you've not, and then bury your head in the sand when the other stuff happens. Absolutely ludicrous, and it's complete and utter hypocrisy, which I suspect actually is a word that you're very used to.
No, I think many people would echo that. And not only that, I think that the privileged position you're in, I think it is an absolutely important point, even though you've tried to avoid it, because the environmental minister of Indonesia said forcing Indonesia to be zero deforestation by 2030 is clearly inappropriate and unfair, and has criticised these plans that are being pushed forward because that will massively halt economic development at a time like Indonesia rapidly needing it when they have millions of people already in deprivation. So I think the position you're speaking on as a privileged position is actually very important in light of developing countries that need investment and development economically rapidly now.
Inaya, that's the most crazy position to take. Of course we need to help. Of course we need to help developing countries, and that is why we need to establish the funds where rich countries are contributing substantially this £100 billion a year to help developing countries get going. That's why we need to increase the UK's foreign aid budget. Both of those things are not happening. We've got a government which is cutting back on helping poor people. We've got all sorts of problems which are going to make the developing world much more affected by the climate crisis. We've got to look after other people, and we've got to also be aware of the fact that we've got to be aware of the fact that the problem is the fossil fuel industry, which is
any action is justified. So do you think that authoritarian action is justified if it means mitigating the effects of climate change? Can you be honest right now? Do you think authoritarian action is justified in order to meet your environmental goals?
We are a completely non-violent, civil resistance organisation. We're not authoritarian. We are demonstrating in a way which is allowed and which is the cornerstone of democracy. Nobody ever got anywhere in terms of major social change by being nice. The suffragettes smashed every single window in Oxford Street so that you, Inaya, could have the vote. People don't...
Please don't compare yourself to major civil rights movements across the 20th century and before that. Please, you are not comparable to the suffragettes.
I disagree. We are comparable. We're facing a much bigger problem than the suffragettes faced. The suffragettes were honourable and they got the vote
Obviously,
for half
as a man, you're entitled to say
but
this.
we are looking at the biggest catastrophe that has ever hit humanity. And you guys have got your heads in the sand. You are ostriches, and you will be seen as such.
No, if we don't conform to your position, that doesn't mean that we have our head in the sand. There is different positions on this. There are many climate scientists that have different perspectives. And this idea that we must conform to yours, or that we have our head in the sand, or that we're turning a blind eye is absolutely wrong. And to me, that's the language of authoritarians, quite frankly.
You've just stated an untruth. Almost every single major international organisation has said exactly the same thing. They've said code red. They've said only 3 to 4 years for us to get this sorted out. You guys are out of time, and your audience needs to look around and needs to do their own research.
We're giving you
they need to read some reports.
We regularly get you on. I do wonder, just lastly, I do wonder whether or not if we get 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the line and the doomsday situation that you're predicting hasn't happened, are you actually going to be quite disappointed about that?
Patrick, of course I don't want any kind of doomsday. I want your children to live in a lovely world. I want your children to enjoy robins at Christmas. I don't want them to be sitting in a world which is burning. I don't want them to be living in a world where people abroad have no way of being able to make food. I don't want them to live in a world where supermarkets don't have food on the aisles. And that is where we're heading, and that's what every single serious climate predictor says. We're heading for a 2.7 degree rise in temperature, which is almost impossible to imagine. And even if the risk is not as high as I think it is, we still should not be taking the risk. But every single person says the same thing. Every single reputable agency says the same thing. They say we have to get worried, we need to change radically, and we must stop giving profits to the fossil fuel industry. The fossil fuel industry has Boris by the balls, and we've got to stop
you off there because we've run out of time. We've got a show to do. You've got to go and block some insulation from getting to our house. Dr. Bing Jones there, one of the Insulate Britain spokespeople. Well, that was quite spicy.
I mean, I think that the fact that individuals like this are increasingly on the ascendancy, speaking to children, terrifying them, paralysing them, when we're actually in the most economically and materially secure times and actually in the best position as a society to adapt to environmental and social challenges far better than the catastrophic conditions that many of our ancestors had with natural disasters, tsunamis, typhoons, all of these things. And we, in a developed society, as we should be developing other countries, are in the best position to cope. And I think this catastrophizing is massively dangerous and irresponsible.
Well, there we are. Let us know what your views are. Lots of you have been. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll go to those very shortly. Keep all of those views coming in. You can also tweet us, of course you can, at GB News. We'll be back very shortly with more of today's top stories and plenty of your views after a very short break.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point right here on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Inayat Folarin Iman, and we've got a show, as ever, stacked full of all today's biggest stories, the best guests, and everything to get you going.
Yes, absolutely. Make sure that you continue to send us your views as usual, gbviews@gbnews, and we'll be reading them out throughout the show. But first, as usual, here's the news.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. This is your news at 11 o'clock. The Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi, has admitted the government made a mistake when it combined a vote on disciplinary procedures with a Tory MP's suspension. Former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson has now officially resigned. He faced a 30-day ban for breaching lobbying rules, but a Conservative vote blocked the recommendation before a U-turn was made. Mr Zahawi says the government can't be complacent in the face of perceptions of sleaze.
Conflating that with a specific case of Owen Paterson was a mistake. I think to reflect within 24 hours and by the morning have the leader of the House, and I take collective responsibility for this, by the way, to come forward and say, look, we made a mistake to conflate the two, the really important one to get right, and we need cross-party negotiation on this. And I urge all my fellow parliamentarians from whichever party to shed their politics. Let's not play tit for tat. Let's get this right for generations and actually for your viewers, for the country, to have confidence in the system of scrutiny of MPs.
Yorkshire County Cricket Club chairman Roger Hutton has resigned with immediate effect. He's now calling on the executive board to follow suit. It's after the club was suspended from hosting England matches in the wake of Azim Rafiq's racism allegations. Hutton says frustration with board members and senior management led to his decision. England Rugby Union captain Owen Farrell has tested positive for COVID. It's a major setback for the squad on the eve of their Autumn Nations Series clash with Tonga at Twickenham. No other players have tested positive. Farrell is isolating and will take further tests later. The Rugby Football Union says he may still be able to play tomorrow. British Airways parent company IAG has warned it's likely to make a £2.5 billion loss this year. BA says passenger numbers are starting to improve but remain well below pre-pandemic levels. The airline says the reopening of transatlantic travel will help the company return to profit. It plans to fly about 60% of its pre-pandemic capacity in the current quarter. An alleged terrorist accused of fatally stabbing Sir David Amess will enter pleas next month. Ali Harbi Ali, charged with murdering the Conservative MP last month, appeared at the Old Bailey for a preliminary hearing via video link. A provisional trial date has already been set for the 7th of March next year. Prince Andrew's lawyers are expected to argue for the dismissal of Virginia Giuffre's lawsuit at a hearing on January the 4th. A US judge issued the schedule a day after saying a trial date is likely to fall between September and December next year. Giuffre claims the Duke of York sexually abused her when she was 17. He categorically denies the allegation. Brexit Minister Lord Frost will meet one of Brussels' top officials later to address disputes over the Northern Ireland Protocol and fishing rights. It follows a meeting with the French Europe Minister Clément Beaune in Paris yesterday. The diplomatic storm was triggered by a feud over licences for French vessels operating in UK waters. Earlier this week, a Scottish trawler caught up in the row was released by French authorities after being held for 6 days. Average UK house prices hit a record high in October, reaching £270,000. According to data compiled by Halifax, property values increased by £2,500 during the month. Wales remains the strongest performer across the UK, with annual house prices inflation at 12.9%. Several factors, including the recent stamp duty cut and buyers seeking larger properties, are believed to be behind the rise. UK shopper footfall was higher than any other major European economy in October, in an encouraging sign for retailers ahead of Christmas. Total UK footfall was down by 13.7% compared with 2 years ago and was an improvement on September's figures. Retail parks were particularly popular, almost reaching pre-pandemic levels, while shopping centre footfall also went up. Now, icebergs don't usually make it as far south as Glasgow, but one has arrived at the COP26 climate summit in the city. The 4-ton block of ice has been shipped in from Greenland by scientific activist group Arctic Base Camp as a visible reminder of the scale of the climate crisis. 1,000 litres of glacial meltwater collected from the fjords are also being given out in bottles to delegates. Professor Gail Whiteman says they want to send a strong message to world leaders.
This is to remind them of how much is melting. So in 1 second, 17 million of these bottles are melting. Based on decadal average, based on some of the research that our scientists have done. So this is not a small amount. 17 million of these bottles a second are melting off the Greenland ice sheet.
I'll be back with the latest headlines in half an hour. Now let's return to Patrick and Anaya and to the point.
Good morning, everybody. It's Patrick Christie's and Anaya Falarin Iman here on To The Point with you. We've got an action-packed final hour for you. Shortly, I'm going to be talking about our failing justice system. You will not believe some of the figures that have just come out about how few people are actually going to court. But there's a lot else on as well.
Yes, protesters, including Greta Thunberg, are taking to the streets of Glasgow to demand action on climate change from leaders and politicians as the COP26 talks continue. We'll be across it with our reporter who is there.
Yes, indeed. And Facebook is set to end its facial recognition feature. So it was initially introduced to aid people in tagging friends and family on the platform. However, privacy concerns have grown significantly over time.
Yes, and police in England and Wales have recorded the highest ever number of rape cases for the last 12 months to the end of June. We have all of that coming up and much more across the programme. You can get in touch with us as usual at GBViews at gbnews.uk. But first, Patrick gives his views on the latest crime statistics.
We have a broken justice system in this country, and criminals know it. Damning new figures have revealed that the number of crimes that end up in court has slumped to a record low of just 1 in 15. Official data showed the proportion of recorded crimes which led to a charge or summons fell to just 6.5%. This is the first time the percentage of overall crimes that has led to a charge has dropped below 7%. Bear in mind that that figure was 15% in 2015. The whole thing is pretty concerning, let's be honest, but the absolute major concern for me is how few sex crimes ever make it to court. Whilst the number of trials is dropping, the number of reported rapes is going up. The number of rapes reported to police in England and Wales soared 10% year on year to record levels of more than 61,000 in the 12 months to June. 61,000. But the number of those reports which have led to a suspect being taken to court fell to an all-time low. The number of sex crimes as a whole surged by 8%. It included a record 48,500 recorded in the 3 months from April leading up to June. Now, that's according to figures from the Office for National Statistics. That's up 15% on the same quarter in 2019. But, get this, just 1.4% of rapes reported led to a suspect being charged or summoned. Again, another record low. I think we're in a situation now where sex offenders know, and sadly they appear to be right about this, that if they commit a sex crime, they may well end up getting away with it. What does this mean for the safety of women and girls on our streets? Well, it means they aren't safe, doesn't it? Authorities always hide behind the argument that there have been several high-profile events, like, of course, the murder of Sarah Everard, that led to an increase in reporting these crimes. And, all right, that may well be the case. They also usually hide behind the idea that all of a sudden they've got better at recording crimes, and that's why the numbers have gone up. Well, I can't help us feel, though, that the reality is simply that there are more crimes being committed, probably because there are more people than ever before, and that because our police force isn't expanding at the same rate, then we just don't have the capacity to charge as many people or bring them to court. It could also be that more than half of magistrates' courts have actually closed since 2010, meaning that people have to travel upwards of 50 miles for local justice. It's not very local then, is it? It's more like distant justice. Look, the Sarah Everard case was shocking from top to bottom. But there's something that wasn't spoken about as much as I think it should have been. Wayne Couzens was a serving Metropolitan Police officer, we all know that. But that also means that he knows about how police investigate crimes, about how likely or otherwise people are to get caught. And he thought he'd get away with it, didn't he? That's the level of faith that he had in our justice system. As long as criminals, especially dangerous sex criminals, know that if they commit a crime, they probably won't get caught and they probably won't go to court, then they're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, when you do hear statistics like it is a record low, then I think that's absolutely something that needs to be investigated and looked into absolutely why that is. But I wouldn't also deny some of the context. I do think that there has been changes in reporting, and obviously it's a fundamentally different crime, but we saw that in a lot of the hate crime statistics, which has given the appearance that it's gone up, when actually there is a lot of changes in how people report that and how that's also recorded. And I do also think that we are in a social context where there is a kind of changing understanding of what sexual violence is. I think that actually increasingly when it happened with the Me Too movement, there was much conversation about what consent is and kind of what that looks like in the present day. And so I do think there are other factors involved. And one more thing, that the unfortunate, or well, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know, but the majority of sex crimes are committed amongst people that people know. And we have this perception that it is someone grabbing you in the street. That's actually very unlikely. It is people often that you know. And so the way of finding out the truth in that, I think, is almost innately incredibly difficult and very sad.
Yeah, and also when I was working as a local reporter, I used to have to go to court a lot to report on the trials that are taking place there. And, you know, I've sat in on numerous rape trials, and it is just a very sad fact that actually rape is a very difficult thing to prove, actually. In the cold light of day, before a jury, you know, it's a really depressingly sad fact that it is a very difficult thing to actually, you know, it has to be very clear cut, really. And so I can understand why that diminishes the figures, and I can understand why there's a low conviction rate when it comes to it. But when I really look at the way that I think someone like a Wayne Couzens operated, I get that he was obviously, I mean, look, the guy's, you know, got a lot going on, hasn't he, flipping out? But, I mean, I really do think that he thought he would get away with it. And if a police officer thinks that, who knows the way that the law operates and knows the way investigating things that, that's a real concern for me. And, you know, I struggle to accept that the only reasons why we're seeing such low conviction rates or things going to court is just because, you know, oh, well, we've had a pandemic on or this.
And I think the UK, which is a liberal democracy, does have some of the lowest conviction rates in the developed world, and that is something that we should fundamentally be concerned about. And I think we should be auditing every aspect of the criminal and legal justice system to find out if there are discrepancies that could at least go some way into explaining it. But I do also think that when it comes to a crime, we must maintain, at least to some degree, the presumption of innocence and due process. And I wouldn't want to see a situation where some, for example, the threshold is lowered in order to drive up rates of conviction or charge. I think we have to make sure that we maintain the principle of evidence and beyond reasonable doubt.
Yes, absolutely. And obviously, I've just given you a little snapshot there. I mean, those were some of the figures. I mean, it's a massive report. And I think the thing for me, I decided to focus on the sex crime elements of it because I think, you know, realistically, that was a particularly shocking area when you just see that 1.5% of, you know, rape allegations, etc., actually end up getting proven in a court of law. I mean, that's an astonishingly low fact. And I think, you know, we're living in a time at the moment, aren't we, after numerous very depressing situations involving the likes of Sarah Everard, etc., where, you know, it's front and centre at the moment, safety of women in our streets. And I just don't think they're as well protected as they
Yeah, and I, to be honest, in all, I do actually agree with you. And you did, I think, a monologue yesterday about the grooming gang situation, and you hear things like that where mistake after mistake was made from an institutional level, and actually clear crimes seemingly, you know, were committed and nothing was done, and that absolutely no justification for that. And therefore, I think that the police and our justice system and our legal system, really, we need to have tough questions asked of them when it comes to these types of sexual violence.
Indeed. Well, your views have been coming in. We'll go to those shortly. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thank you very much for everyone who has been getting in touch. And a lot of you are actually focusing on the Insulate Britain spokesperson that we had earlier. Some of them I'm allowed to read out as well on national television. But we'll go to those shortly. But it's quite on brand, that, I think, because Greta Thunberg has been one of the most vocal climate activists, hasn't she, in recent times? And she's basically decided now that she's going to be marching with 100,000 other people, apparently, and shout a lot louder. They're going to actually be protesting the actual climate conference.
Yes, well, the 18-year-old from Sweden will be surrounded by thousands of other activists in an attempt to put pressure on leaders at COP26 to make a change to their environmental policies. Greta controversially left a carbon offsetting meeting after urging attendees to stop greenwashing.
Well, to help us look at the impact of the massive protests and Greta's impact at COP26 as a whole is our Scotland correspondent, the wonderful, the one, the only, Davy Donaldson. How are you, Davy? Where are you today, then? I tell you what, we'll busk it for a little bit while Davy sorts his sound out. Ironically, given that we're talking about climate conference, Davy froze for a second there, didn't he? I am actually literally here all week, by the way, because I'm going to be covering Tonight Live on Saturday and Sunday as well. Possibly not the best advert for that, but there we go.
The thing is, you know, I have no issue with young people protesting, but I do worry about the collapse of adult authority and this kind of almost authoritarian elevation of young people as, like, just because they are young, that must mean that, you know, they have special insight into truth and knowledge and about. I think, you know, most young people, you know, barely can, you know, tie their shoes or you know, all of those kinds of things. The idea that children should be making fundamental decisions politically, I think is very concerning.
Can I just say something now that people might find a little bit controversial, which I know might not come as a shock to everyone. I look at Greta Thunberg there, and I think she's 18, and she's obviously been at this now for a number of years, which means she was, by definition, a child when she first started doing it. And she's always looked very young for her age as well. So she's a very young-looking child. She obviously, as well as we know, has got, you know, a couple of... I think it's Asperger's, isn't it? And so the issue that the question I would raise, anyway, is when these people put her front and centre, so you make her the pin-up for things like Extinction Rebellion and for the climate movement, etc., are they just trying to use her as a shield? Because if you criticise it, it's very easy then, isn't it, to seem like you're shouting at a child, or you're shouting at a child who's got a certain issue going on with them mentally as well. And I just wonder whether or not they're using her as a bit of a shield, and whether or not that's fair, actually.
You know, my thing, if kids or young people are concerned about environmental things, which rightly so, I'm concerned about pollution and plastics and deforestation and the likes, I would love to see them actually going to university, studying engineering, studying, you know, different sciences, to be at the forefront of the technological innovation. I think it's very easy to go out and miss school and kind of say, oh, you're stealing our future, without actually, if you are the future, be part of the technological innovation, which you will be a leader in transforming society. society. I'd love to see Greta Thunberg actually study environmental sciences or economics or environmental engineering at university and start creating technologies that are going to help the future.
Yeah, well, I agree completely. These are live images now of that protest. We were expecting 100,000 people there. Very difficult.
Oh, it's just started. Maybe it'll keep going.
Started early, actually. I would have thought they'd all still be in bed, but well done. I was wrong about that. I did them a disservice there. They're up and about and they're at it, aren't they? So this is obviously just the very start of the march, isn't it? And it doesn't look like they're marching anywhere just yet, but it's building. Crowds are building, and of course there's naturally a pro-Palestine flag there as well, which is an odd thing to do at a climate march.
There's this incredible gentleman who young guy who started an organisation, the Great Ocean Cleanup, and you know it's done amazing work creating technology to clean up the ocean. He's a role model, but he's not elevated to the level of Greta Thunberg, who basically screams at adults who just start clapping. It's
That's so true. It's
just mad.
There are people who've come up with great inventions, like the sea bins and things like that as well. These real kind of technological advancements that we've got now, and yes, it's strange, isn't it, as a society who we elevate? But you know what? One thing I do really think is, I don't know whether or not this has always been the case. Maybe some of our viewers who've maybe got, shall we say, a few more miles on the clock, to put it politely, could get in touch and let me know what you think about this. Do you feel like the youngest generations have always been like this? They've always felt as though they've known best. They've always felt as though they've been entitled to it. They've always shouted and screamed, and that actually they're right and everyone else is wrong. They stand for progress.
No, the majority, funnily enough, very few people know that the majority of young people actually voted for Margaret Thatcher during her first term. And so this idea that young people are always these kind of, idealistic, or in the sense of trying to topple society, doesn't really meet out.
I wonder how Thatcher would have dealt with Thunberg.
Well,
we'll never know.
Indeed.
Anyway, well, look, moving away from the climate march for now, still to come, we'll look at why Facebook has scrapped facial recognition, so stay with us.
Hello, good morning. Another frosty but bright start for southern parts of the UK. Cloudier and milder elsewhere, but actually through today it's dry for most, ahead of some unsettled weather arriving at the weekend. That unsettled weather coming with these weather fronts. But for the time being, those fronts are simply staying enough away to give us a largely dry start, and also a bright start there across East Anglia in the southeast. A touch of frost first thing, a chilly start. Stays bright until lunchtime, but these areas of cloud are sinking southeastwards, and for most it's a cloudier day compared to yesterday. Still some breaks in the east and the south, still some sunshine coming through, and for most it's a dry day, but some spots of rain there for North Wales, North West England and Western Scotland. A milder day as well. We've lost that wind chill. The temperature's a couple of degrees up on yesterday, 11 to 13 Celsius. And into bonfire nights, well, it's looking reasonable for most, with large parts of the UK staying dry with clear spells. But there will be thicker cloud towards the northwest and some light outbreaks of rain until after midnight, when the rain turns more persistent for northern and western Scotland and the wind picks up as well. Further south, with a bit more of a breeze, a bit more cloud. Certainly a frost-free start to the weekend, 8s and 9s as we start the day on the thermometers. But a lot of cloud and that keen breeze sticking around for Saturday in the south. Further north, wet and windy. Heavy rain for the West Highlands for the first part of Saturday. That wet weather sinking through Northern Ireland, Northern England, and then arriving into Wales by the middle of the afternoon. But the front is weakening, so not a huge amount of rain expected in these places. The wind, though, does pick up behind the weather front. A very windy night indeed to come for northern parts of the UK, particularly northern Scotland, where, combined with some large waves, well, that could cause some coastal impacts. But it is a milder weekend for all of us.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Well, in a significant change of policy, Facebook has said it is going to end the use of facial recognition for all photos and videos uploaded onto its platform. Facebook, which recently changed its holding company name to Meta, is doing this to address growing privacy concerns about people's data.
Well, the platform has used facial recognition since 2010 with software designed to automatically identify people who appear in the photos. This tool was designed to enable users to more easily tag their friends and family, linking the person's respective Facebook account to the images. It also helped alert users if someone had uploaded a photo of them.
Indeed. Well, it is something that is really an interesting subject for Facebook. I mean, Jim, what do you make of all of this, given that they've changed their holding company name to Meta? Is this a PR exercise, or is this Facebook finally listening to the concerns that have been raised about it in relation to privacy and people's data? What do you think?
Well, I think it's a bit late for Facebook to be trying to persuade people that they're taking our privacy seriously, unfortunately for them. Of course, any step like this is welcome. The problems with facial recognition technology are well known. It's not something that's especially accurate. It has racial biases very frequently. So it's a good thing to get rid of it. And of course, it means there are less possibilities of things like state intrusion to get this data, or any other kind of nefarious activity. But I think we should really be worrying about their advertising regime and the way it tries to deal with our interests, if you like. That's the thing that really concerns me. Facebook know everything about our opinions, and they try to sell us adverts on the basis of that. That's a really, really intrusive practice.
Yeah, 100%. And Jim, obviously in your role as Executive Director of the Open Rights Group, no doubt you are very, very concerned about it. It's hard to know where to start with this stuff, because if they've been able to do the facial recognition thing since 2010, I mean, I can remember when the police might park the odd facial recognition camera on a street somewhere in Milton Keynes just hoping to catch some kind of international warlord wandering around there. It all kicked off, didn't it? But actually, I mean, Facebook know all of our faces. They know everyone in the world, don't they, really? And that's a bit of a concern.
Yeah, well, that's right. If they can identify for your friends and family, they can do it for anybody else, and that means If the state decides to ask it to do it, then it can. But I think, we have to also consider, perhaps they thought there was some utility for people, but, I don't really think that was a very strong, very strong reason. Because, just to be able to tag people more conveniently on the basis of checking faces versus building up a map of everybody and what they look like across the planet for whatever purpose anyone might want to ask for, I think that's a bit extreme.
But Jim, other people would say, well, this is just the future now. I mean, with the metaverse coming, people are going to have a potentially fully augmented or virtual reality existence where their data, their biometrics, all of their information is going to be part of this almost universal network. And so we're really just delaying the inevitable. What do you think?
Well, I, for one, welcome my meta overlords. But, I mean, let's hope not, eh? I mean, this is, I think, the really big problem here we have with Facebook and Meta and their sort of big plans for augmented reality. I mean, do we trust them anymore? And if we don't, are we going to choose their products? And if we're not trusting them and we don't want to choose their products, what is this company actually going to do to get us to trust them again? And if they can't, then their future's gone. And they're already having huge problems with young people. They don't want to participate in this product anymore. They're not signing up in the way that older people did. And, frankly, it's people my age and so on who are using Facebook to keep in touch with friends from university days and so on. It isn't the younger generation, and that's a real problem for them. And I think that really tells you what happens when you abuse people's trust and privacy. It isn't some kind of, oh gosh, it's, privacy campaign is complaining again, and they need to get with it and just understand that we're all profiled and the computer's going to know everything. That's not how it works. You jettison trust at your peril as a commercial organization. So, Facebook really, they're just suffering the consequences of bad decisions they've made for several decades now.
But Jim, I mean, what do you think should be done about these platforms? Because this is a debate. We have TikTok, we have Twitter, we have all of these big platforms, but there's concerns about free speech. Some people are saying we should break up the big tech companies. Other people are saying they should be treated as publishers, not platforms. I mean, and now we also have the online harms bill that is looking to regulate and fine companies. What do you think we can do in order to make sure that they are much more accountable to their users?
Well, I think the big thing, and I'm afraid the government's going on the wrong direction on this, but the big thing is we should have more control over our privacy and personal data. Now, Facebook, when they profile us for advertising, they do it on the basis of the things we've looked online, that also have Facebook widgets on them, and also the pages we liked on Facebook. And those two things, and the links we click on within Facebook, those things help them understand what we read, what we like to read, what we share, and what our political beliefs are, what kind of commercial products we buy, and so on. And it didn't tell anyone really that that's what it was doing when it built that database. And now under GDPR, technically, we think it is unlawful for them to be doing that. And there are challenges in Europe now saying, if you really want to build up this massive profile of people, you have to ask them first. You have to get their consent and agreement for that to happen.
I just worry, Jim.
You're breaking the law.
Yeah, I just worry, Jim, that it's happened, I think. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't rail against it, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't, but I'm very sorry, but I'm being shouted at, Jim. I've got to move on because we've got.
Well, let's hope they get done over in the courts. That's all I can say. Watch this space. They're going to end up with big fines, and let's hope it happens in the UK too.
All right, Jim, look, we'll have to come back on and talk about this again very soon. Jim Killick there, Executive Director of the Open Rights Group, which is a campaigning organisation aiming to raise awareness of digital rights and civil liberties issues.
Fantastic. Well, after the break, the turn of the Vaz. Could the disgraced former MP return to politics following the sentencing of the Labour MP Claudia Webb for harassment? But before that, let's have a look at the latest news.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. Here are the latest headlines. The Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi has admitted the government made a mistake when it combined a vote on disciplinary procedures with a Tory MP's suspension. Former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson has now officially resigned. He faced a 30-day ban for breaching lobbying rules, but a Conservative vote blocked the recommendation before making a U-turn. Yorkshire County Cricket Club chairman Roger Hutton has resigned with immediate effect. He's calling on the executive board to follow suit. It's after the club was suspended from hosting England matches in the wake of Azim Rafiq's racism allegations. Hutton says frustration with board members and senior management led to his decision. England Rugby Union captain Owen Farrell has tested positive for COVID. It's a major setback for the squad on the eve of their Autumn Nations series clash with Tonga at Twickenham. No other players have tested positive. British Airways parent company IAG has warned it's likely to make a £2.5 billion loss this year. BA says passenger numbers are starting to improve but remain well below pre-pandemic levels. The airline says the reopening of transatlantic travel will help the company return to profit. You're right up to date. I'll be back with more on all of today's main stories at the top of the hour. See you then.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Now, in a rather depressing day for politics and indeed the world, Claudia Webb's conviction for threatening to throw acid at a love rival could open the way for shamed ex-Labour MP Keith Vaz to attempt a return to national politics. Now, Mr Vaz, the UK's most infamous washing machine salesman, quit Parliament at the 2019 election, having been handed a 6-month suspension from the Commons after he was caught offering to buy Class A drugs for male sex workers.
Yes, well, it is a striking story to find out that he may be returning to Parliament. But David Wood joins us now to talk about this issue. What do you make of this, David, the potential of Keith Vaz returning to politics?
Well, Anaya, Keir Starmer must be holding his head in his hands right now. He's got the Conservative Party on the ropes with the sleaze row involving the ex-minister Owen Paterson, and Boris Johnson and his party are all over the place. And now, meanwhile, he's just had one of his former MPs who was withdrawn the whip, Claudia Webb, convicted. She's determined to cling on as MP, but of course that's not necessarily a given. But even if she goes, then we could have Keith Vaz brought back into the fold as a candidate standing for Labour. He must be in absolute despair over this.
David, you're the Sun on Sunday political editor. I mean, is this a particularly surprising week, or have you seen anything like this before, where there's so many political scandals making up in relation to individuals?
I think you have to wind the clock back to before I was even a political correspondent, back in the 90s, the early 90s, in the John Major government, when there was sleaze everywhere. It seems to come in a rush. I think then the problem back in the 90s was that John Major had this back to basics campaign where he was telling us how to live our lives as good family members, and of course half his cabinet weren't doing that at the time. And it just so happens now we're having a run of stories about a sleazy nature. We had the Matt Hancock debacle where he was caught during the COVID kissing his lover, and now of course you've got Claudia Webb and Owen Paterson. It just doesn't end.
No, there's a. I won't mention it because it's not actually your newspaper, but which of course is some would say, the best. But there we go. It was another one. Bless you.
Nice
there you go. You see, just one mention of Keith Vaz, and you're allergic to Keith Vaz. Anyway, aren't we all in a way? If you open up one famous newspaper today, what you see is one page, the Owen Paterson thing, the sleaze allegations. Then you see a little nib of Claudia Webb. Then you see a picture of Keith Vaz, and you just think, goodness me, we might as well just knock the place down and start again, don't you? I mean, look, is there any realistic way that you think that Keith Vaz could win that local election? Will he stand?
Well, there is a realistic way that can happen, Chris. And what can actually happen here is that Patrick, what can happen here is that you can have first of all, you've got to get rid of Claudia Webb. So for that to happen, there needs to be a recall motion. There needs 10% of the population to say they don't want her as an MP, and that will trigger a by-election. The question then is whether Keith Vaz will stand. Now, he's dismissing this as tittle-tattle, or people close to him are, but he is known to have been going around delivering leaflets, not election leaflets, but leaflets helping the community. He is, of course, chairman of the local party in Leicester East. So he could then, of course, stand as a candidate if he was so selected. Can the Labour leader block him? Probably not under the existing rules. If the party wants him to stand, then there's a good chance that he will stand. There's also rumours swirling around that he might get his daughter to stand. So it will be daughter of Vaz, if not Keith Vaz himself. The question is, will people vote for them? Will people vote for them? Don't forget the majority in Leicester East was reduced from 22,000 to 6,000 at the last election. What Keir Starmer really needs in there, if he's going to win that seat, is a good candidate who can win. But then a lot of people in Leicester East support Keith Vaz. They like him. He's got a big constituency of support in there for some reason, and so he would see himself as a possible contender.
I think he's got some front on him, hasn't he, to be fair? I mean, to come back and, well, potentially anyway, come back after that, I think is a little bit much. But the Owen Paterson issue was obviously one that's reared its head. It's not going away anytime soon as well. With your, esteemed Sun on Sunday political editor hat on, did it all go the way you thought it was, or has this surprised you, the kind of haphazard nature of it all?
Well, Boris Johnson seems to have invested a lot of political capital in supporting Owen Paterson, only then to turn tables the following day. It makes me wonder what he was thinking about the size of the rebellion. Did the chief whip tell him how big this rebellion was? If he did, why didn't he think about that? Were his aides telling him how this would play out in the media? And then, of course, for having backed this man, for him then to step down and throw in the towel, in the same way he backed Matt Hancock. And then suddenly, within a day or two, Matt Hancock has to resign from the cabinet. So it is a big reverse for Boris Johnson. And again, Labour looked quite good. Angela Rayner actually looked quite good in the Commons the other day. She was coming out with this line about it's one rule for them, one rule for the rest of us, which will play down well in those Labour seats which went Tory at the last election. So you mustn't underestimate the damage this has done. Don't think in terms of the commissioner for standards or lobbying. You don't need to go into all that detail. You just need to see how people out there in the constituencies will look on this, and they'll look at it as Tory sleaze and corruption, and they'll think bad of it. So this is quite damaging for the government.
You say that it might reflect this idea of Tory sleaze, but some people would say that this was actually very much a media push to kind of hound Owen Paterson. I mean, do you recognise or resonate with those arguments at all, that this was actually very much a kind of media-driven thing rather than actually something that emerged from concerns that the public had?
No, it's not media driven. You're driving it, if you like. You're the media, and you're driving it as well. But in that sense, you're not driving it, are you? You're just covering a story in the same way we covered a story. This was driven by the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner, who held an investigation into his lobbying, found him guilty, and it was put before Parliament for a vote. All the media were doing was covering that. And of course, what happened. He tried to get his MPs on side to block the suspension, which they then did. And then after the fallout from that, the outcry, the rebellion by 51 MPs Tory MPs who didn't back it, there was suddenly a rethink. And I think what changed Boris Johnson's mind, particularly with the trigger, was when Owen Paterson went on TV and said he'd do exactly the same again. And then, of course, it all unravelled rapidly with Owen Paterson then saying, "We're standing down as an MP." So the whole thing has just triggered, gone in different ways over 24, 48 hours.
Absolutely. David, thank you very much for your time, as always. David Wooding there, Sun on Sunday political editor and indeed all-round political expert as well, of course. Well, we are going to be now revisiting, I think, a little package that we did before about Insulate Britain. If you missed it, we had some chap on to talk about insulating Britain. And, well, look, hey, I'll tell you what, I think we'll just let you see what happened.
Dr. Bing Jones.
There have been no serious problems documented that we know about. We always have a policy of letting blue lights through, and the incidents that you're talking about has been completely... Nobody's managed to substantiate.
You want to go at me for not reading the Chatham House report. You need to go and read other reports that prove that people have been made seriously ill and nearly died as a result. So you can't, on one hand, come here and say, well, I've read the report and you've not, and then bury your head in the sand when the other stuff happens. Absolutely ludicrous, and it's complete and utter hypocrisy, which I suspect actually is a word that you're very used to.
No, I think many people would echo that. And not only that, I think that the privileged position you're in, I think it is an absolutely important point, even though you've tried to avoid it, because the environmental minister of Indonesia said forcing Indonesia to be zero deforestation by 2030 is clearly inappropriate and unfair, and has criticised these plans that are being pushed forward, because that will massively halt economic development at a time like Indonesia rapidly needing it, when they have millions of people already in deprivation. So I think the position you're speaking on, as a privileged position, is actually very important in light of developing countries that need investment and development economically rapidly now.
Inaya, that's the most crazy position to take. Of course we need to help. Of course we need to help developing countries, and that is why we need to establish the funds where rich countries are contributing substantially, this £100 billion a year, to help developing countries get going. That's why we need to increase the UK's foreign aid budget. Both of those things are not happening. We've got a government which is cutting back on helping poor people. We've got all sorts of problems which are going to make the developing world much more affected by the climate crisis. We've got to look after other people, and we've got to also be aware of the fact that the problem is the fossil fuel industry, which is
any action is justified. So do you think that authoritarian action is justified if it means mitigating the effects of climate change? Can you be honest right now? Do you think authoritarian action is justified in order to meet your environmental goals?
We are a completely non-violent, civil resistance organisation. We're not authoritarian. We are demonstrating in a way which is allowed and which is the cornerstone of democracy. Nobody ever got anywhere in terms of major social change by being nice. The suffragettes smashed every single window in Oxford Street so that you, Inaya, could have the vote.
please don't compare yourself to major civil rights movements across the 20th century and before that. Please, you are not comparable to the suffragettes.
I disagree. We are comparable. We're facing a much bigger problem than the suffragettes faced. The suffragettes were honourable and they got the vote
Obviously,
for half
as a man, you're entitled to say
But
this,
we
right?
are looking at the biggest catastrophe that has ever hit humanity. And you guys have got your heads in the sand. You are ostriches, and you will be seen as such.
No, if we don't conform to your position, that doesn't mean that we have our head in the sand. There is different positions on this. There are many climate scientists that have different perspectives. And this idea that we must conform to yours, or that we have our head in the sand, or that we're turning a blind eye is absolutely wrong. And to me, that's the language of authoritarians, quite frankly.
You've just stated an untruth. Almost every single major international organisation has said exactly the same thing. They've said code red. They've said only 3 to 4 years for us to get this sorted out. You guys are out of time, and your audience needs to look around and needs to do their own research.
We're giving you
they need to read some reports.
Your case.
We regularly get you on. I do wonder, just lastly, I do wonder whether or not if we get 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the line and the doomsday situation that you're predicting hasn't happened, are you actually going to be quite disappointed about that?
Patrick, of course I don't want any kind of doomsday. I want your children to live in a lovely world. I want your children to enjoy robins at Christmas. I don't want them to be sitting in a world which is burning. I don't want them to be living in a world where people abroad have no way of being able to make food. I don't want them to live in a world where supermarkets don't have food on the aisles. And that is where we're heading, and that's what every single serious climate predictor says. We're heading for a 2.7 degree rise in temperature, which is almost impossible to imagine. And even if the risk is not as high as I think it is, we still should not be taking the risk. But every single person says the same thing.
Well, Dr. Bing Jones there.
Yes, that was a very heated discussion, but hopefully illuminating in terms of what Insulate Britain are about, and actually the views about catastrophe and horrendous thing that's going to happen if we don't conform to their particular perspective.
Yes, terrifying the living heck out of kids, essentially. Anyway, from one set of fireworks to another. See what I did there? Celebrations across the country are taking place this weekend to mark Bonfire Night. And this year, it's back with even more of a bang, as exactly this time last year, we went into our second national lockdown. So celebrations weren't able to take place.
But some displays will be a little different this year, with the UK's first green bonfire night going ahead. Our London reporter Alice Porter has more.
When it comes to fireworks, Londoners know how to put on a good display. But while the bright lights draw people together, others say they can be bad for the environment.
I'm in Dulwich in South London, and it's the sports club here which is hosting what is believed to be the UK's first green fireworks display. And that means instead of the traditional guy burning on the bonfire will be shown virtually on a massive screen. Fireworks are still happening, but sparklers are strictly not allowed. The event has been as popular as ever and has completely sold out. But do people really want to go to a bonfire night without the bonfire?
I don't think I'd go. Not enough bang for your buck, I suspect.
A bonfire on a screen? That's a bit odd, isn't it? Yeah. So you're going to stand there and warm your hands by a screen? Yeah. No, anything that helps the environment, yes, it's a step in the right direction, but there's got to be a balance.
I think it's a brilliant idea. Anything that can help the environment, because presumably if you've got a bonfire going and fireworks, you're releasing pollutants into the air anyway, so that's not a good idea, is it? So anything that can be done by virtual reality is probably a really good idea.
When the new year of 2020 was celebrated in London, the lack of wind slowed the dispersion of fireworks smoke and led to an air pollution incident. To find out if fireworks are really that bad for the environment, I went back to school for a chemistry experiment.
Magnesium is a real part of fireworks. And you can see that stunning sort of plume of smoke that comes off it. And that smoke is interesting because you can inhale it. And because the particles are so fine, they can actually go into your lungs, right, and lodge there.
So fireworks can be bad, but what about sparklers and what about bonfires?
Back in the 1930s, 40s and 50s, when everyone had a fire, a coal fire at home, the fog in London caused literally thousands of people to die every year. Now what's interesting is that again, bonfires are in a sense replicating those kinds of conditions, slightly different, but nevertheless producing material which will lodge into people's lungs. We have to remember there are lots of people around who do have lung disease, who have lung problems, and particularly in these times of COVID, who have serious respiratory problems after effects. And so we need to think in a kind of bigger way about the impacts of this. And with bonfires, they're fun, but you know what? They're probably too costly in terms of their effects.
With many countries increasingly turning to drones for their displays, including at this year's Olympics in Tokyo, the future of fireworks may be a little more green. Alice Porter, GB News.
Well, there we go, I suppose. I mean, it's interesting, even bonfire night's going green.
Yeah, I mean, green, why not? You know, as long as it still brings the same enjoyment and experience that other forms of bonfire night had, and that's totally fine if it is actually less carbon emitting and environmentally damaging.
Yes, well, I hope that you guys, as we near the end of the show, of course, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you have a tremendous evening this evening, if indeed you are deciding to set fire to something. Hopefully it is a bonfire. And yeah, I mean, I'll be out and about enjoying myself, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, certain things, you know, does everything have to be green all the time? Can't I just light a massive fire and let some rockets off in the air once a year?
I mean, if you're going camping...
And then again on New Year's
burning wood is
and
not
then again on my
environmentally
birthday.
friendly.
No.
Burning wood, you know, emits so much carbon, and that's actually something that a lot of people don't know. And I mean, I just think, you know, our ancestors seem to live hundreds of thousands of years without necessarily green technologies. So we adapt as human beings.
We do. And I don't want to over-sanitise everything. I don't want the entire driver of my life to be looking after the planet. Is that a bad thing to say? Probably is. But anyway, we'll be gone soon, so it doesn't matter. But yes, no, look, thank you everyone who's been tuning in. I'm going to go to some of your views now. Finish with a final word from your good selves, GB Views at gbnews.uk. It's not the... there you go, this is a good one from Lou. It's not the environment that I'm worried about on bonfire night. It's the traumatisation of domesticated animals and wild animals by mass firework displays. Very good point. You know, loads of domestic animals really hate fireworks, understandably so. Also, hedgehogs tend to live in piles of wood, right? And so, actually, you could end up... We had that issue a couple of times. I won't give the
One thing I want to mention, in spite of the Insulate Britain interview that we had today, I actually do think that climate change is a major issue. You know, I think actually we should be investing in nuclear power and finding many different ways in order to mitigate our effect of climate change. I just think catastrophising, alarmism is one of the most dangerous ways and counterproductive ways to deal with any issue, climate change or otherwise.
Yes, well, I'm inclined to agree. And, yes, a lot of you also just getting in touch with us to express your concern at the potential political return, the potential political reincarnation of Keith Vaz, as he may decide to actually stand in Claudia Webb's seat, of course, his former seat. Tell you what, the people of Leicestershire really have been spoilt for choice over the years, haven't they? Anyway, thank you very much, everyone who's been tuning in to the show today. And also, throughout the week, I will be doing Tonight Live tomorrow, actually, Saturday and Sunday. Yes, I will need it. But I hope you all have a wonderful bonfire night. And, guys, what are you doing quickly for bonfire night?
I'm probably just going to go to some park nearby my home. Nothing special.
I'm going to go to Ali Pally and have some mulled wine, I think. Anyway, that's it from us here at To The Point. But don't go away. Up next is The Briefing with the wonderful Isabel Oakeshott.
Hello again. More cloud around compared